Welcome to our Q&A session. We are happy to have our good friend Mandala. He is a Bhakti Yoga enthusiast. He is also the manager and chef at Govinda's vegetarian restaurant. He is known in Ottawa for his delicious dishes. You can meet him at Govinda's, where he enjoys cooking so-called food for the soul. And in general, Mandala is a very nice person who loves to share his passion with others. And that's why we have him with us today.
Thank you for the invitation to this edition of Spiritual Science. It's greatly appreciated.
So let's begin. Our question today is free will real or just an illusion?
Very nice question. Is free will real or is it just an illusion? So, from the yoga perspective, we see that there's many different ways of looking at this. Some people say that we're born with a certain destiny. Nothing is free will. That it's our karma in which we've been born into, and that's just all we get. And that's a very base understanding of free will. There's a wonderful analogy with regards to free will, which is that you have a particular choice you can make in this world initially, where the example is you get on a plane. So I have limited free choice. I can walk on, or I can choose to take a plane ride to Los Angeles. I can choose to go to San Francisco, to Timbuktu, wherever. But once I get on that plane, then my free will has become limited. So I have restrictions on what I can do. The destination is set. We're going to Los Angeles. But on that plane ride, then we have limited free choice to choose. I can watch a television show. I can drink. I can choose vegetarian option or meat option on the plane. And in that way, our free will is limited in some way. So on the grand scheme of the yoga culture coming out of India, that they say that you're born with a particular prarabdha karma, a certain set inclination, destination in this life. And that you have limited free will to move in this way, so on. But we always have the choice in which that we can either turn towards spirit or neglect it and just work on my material life, my material endeavor, my base setup of life. And it doesn't mean that you can't grow in life. You're born poor, you can't become rich. But we're talking about in the most grand scale of, free will. We have this limited of choice. So simultaneously, we have free will and we don't. Some things are predestined. And then we have this limited free will to choose in which direction do we want to go towards. So the yoga culture is really always pushing one towards looking deeper into life, finding what is the best use of my free will. And the best use of free will, according to this yoga culture, is to engage in spiritual activities. Start to understand, who am I? What is this world? What is my position in this world? And what is my original divine source? That's where they're always going to look towards. They don't dwell too much on just the base needs of life of, can I go to the store and have a pop? Or can I sit at home and lounge on the couch all day? You have that limited free will to choose. But once you make a choice, then then that restricts your freedom of movement. There's another great example. Say if I want to go, I choose to jump in the car and I'll turn the engine on, and I want to go 100 kilometers in the car. That restricts my free will. I can't turn hard right. I can't stop quickly. It takes time. So it inhibits our free will. So all of these choices in this life, we have the limited free will to make a certain choice, but then from there, we're restricted in certain senses. So in the ultimate sense, we want to always look towards what is the best use of my free will. And I keep going on about this point because it's an essential point, that how can I make the best use of this life and find my higher purpose of existence, that I don't just want to meet the base needs of life where, eating, sleeping, so on, but I want to connect to a deeper sense of reality. And is it just an illusion? So we've already established that we have this limited free will in this life. And then, or is it just an illusion? We don't really have any free will. Everything's just predestined and you don't really have a say in it. That's not what the yoga wisdom literatures say. They say that you have that limited free will, and what is actually illusion is the sense that I am in control of everything. I have unlimited free will to make choices unlimitedly. We don't quite have that unlimited free will until one starts to understand that they are truly a spiritual being, and they have this spiritual nature, where then they're not bound by the nature of this world. I'll give a Sanskrit term. You want to hear it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it talks about 3 gunas in the Bhagavad Gita. This is one of the greatest wisdom literatures, a 5,000-year-old text, which talks about the whole yoga system and so on. So in the 13th chapter, it talks about the 3 gunas: sattva gun, rajagun, and tamagun. Those are Sanskrit words. We don't need to repeat them today, but the English translation is goodness, passion, and ignorance. And this is how this material world works, where we are working based on these gunas. We're being pulled and controlled by them, sometimes in goodness, sometimes in passion, sometimes in ignorance. And those are what we're bound by. And the goal is to get free from those negative side effects of these gunas, and then we can actually act in our true free will, where we're able to act as a spiritual being, not just as a temporary material body that's being pulled and pushed and shoved into certain situations based on the gunas in which this world operates on. So there's another example, and I'll try to expand on this a little bit, but you can compare this material world as a virtual reality in which there's a certain code, a certain makeup in this virtual reality, and those 3 gunas are one of the main operating systems in which the world works. And we're kind of implanted in this virtual reality where we have this certain material makeup, the setup of our body, and ultimately this yoga system is pushing us to look towards who is the ultimate coder of this virtual reality, so that we approach that supreme being in which we can get freed from those that base reality, and we can be extricated from the virtual reality and go to the original true reality, and where we can have this real free will, this true free expression of the soul and our divine nature, being a true spiritual being. So that example can be expanded on in so many different ways, but there's a very basic understanding of it. And this is the ultimate goal of the yoga process, is that we want to be able to establish this true sense of the self, where that we can find this real happiness, which the heart yearns for, what we're actually looking for. And if we just keep trying to look towards it based on free will of my senses, we actually don't have very limited free will when we actually think of it. Our senses are pulling us here, are pulling us there, and we think we're in charge. But actually these are just the senses which are directing us in a certain way. So until we start to learn to control our senses and engage our senses in through spiritual activities in a spiritual way in this world, then we can rise above those base sense urges, needs, and those 3 gunas that we talked about, and we can fulfill this higher spiritual purpose which every living entity is meant to do. So I hope that gives a basic understanding of free will, and some of the points were spoke about again, but it's a large topic which could take, a whole day to discuss about, and all the intricacies and different vantage points and so on. But in essence, to conclude, that we have limited free will because we're moving about this world dictated by our senses, so on. But when we come to understand our true spiritual identity in connection with our original divine source, as the yoga literatures point us towards, then we find that our free will is opened up more. We have more free will than in the sense of our limited perspective and our limited pursuit for real enjoyment, because that's ultimately what we want through our free will, is we want to enjoy without any restrictions. And as this yoga process describes us, if you actually restrict your senses for not just letting them go wild, but refraining from some activities which could degrade our life, then actually it enhances the quality of our life, by which we can have more free will to move about the world without being pulled down by the senses and the lower gunas, or the lower modes of nature. So I hope it gives something to think about on this topic of, do we have free will, or is it just an illusion? It's something to think about, and this is what this whole program is about, is to think about the deeper thoughts of life and question and come in contact with people who can also give us a broader perspective and help us through our spiritual journey. So thank you for that question.
Yes. And how can we control our senses?
How can we control our senses?
Yeah.
What's recommended is, in different yoga practices, they'll say, some yoga practices, like the mystic yogis will say, or even some spiritual paths or religions, they'll say, stop all activities, push it all away, move to the forest, and become a yogi where there's no indulgence, there's no temptations to enjoy one's senses. But whereas in the Bhagavad Gita, as it describes the process of bhakti and learning to, like we said, regulate the senses, not just snuffing it off where we don't have any modicum of enjoyment in our life and it just becomes a very sterile, plain lifestyle, but we start to regulate our habits. Say if someone is drinking and it's becoming a problem, or they're gambling, or even say something, they want to change their diet, which is very difficult to do, eat too much sugar. That's something I need to work on. But my wife always tells me, okay, just stop it out. And that's a little hard to do, but the trick is to just regulate it. If it's, eating meat and I want to eat more of a healthy green diet, or I drink a 12-pack a day and I just feel like garbage afterwards. Okay, don't try to stop it immediately, cold turkey. That might work for some people and that might be what's needed. And that is a bona fide path, but then you need to still engage the senses in some other way. So instead of just trying to stop it cold turkey, then you just regulate. Okay, I'm drinking a 12-pack a day. I'm going to drink an 11-pack the next day, and then reduce. You start to regulate the senses gradually, then you can get into control of them. If you don't, for some people, if they don't take that more methodical approach to, okay, controlling the senses, seeing that also the difference between this physical body, the subtle urges of the mind, which are just pulling me in this, I want to enjoy in this way, I want to enjoy in that way, and then the higher self, the one who's actually observing the senses, the mind, and the bodily needs, then that can also be a great asset to help control the senses. Understanding I'm actually different from these senses, and I'm of a higher nature. Krishna describes this in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Bhumer apanalo vayu, kammano buddhirevacha, ahankara iti yame, bina prakriti ashtada. This is some beautiful Sanskrit. It's known as a sung language. And they say that, this body's made up of earth, fire, water, air, ether. These are the base elements. And then we have a subtle body, which is the mind, the intelligence, the false ego. And this more subtle nature of existence is dictating us all there. The senses are included in that bundle of the mind. And then in the next verse, this is in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, then he describes that actually those are of a lower category of energy, and there's a higher category of energy, which is comprised of all of the living entities in this world, which they're inherently spiritual. It's a higher category of energy. So that assists us in just distinguishing the difference between our senses, who we actually are, and then these pullings and these urges, and then how we can kind of separate ourselves from them. And then by this gradual regulative practice, and also a cherry on top, just engage the senses in a beneficial way. Don't just sit at home, watch Netflix, go on that base push and inclination that we're pulled to do, but go out there, try to find some way I can contribute to society in a voluntary way, and find people who you can connect to that are also on this pursuit of a higher existence, a higher way to conduct ourselves in life. So it's a work in progress, and it doesn't happen overnight. We all have a certain thing that we'll struggle on with our senses, that we're just pulled to. It's so hard to give up. But by a daily spiritual practice, that's a huge asset that gives you strength. It can be meditation, breath work, even yoga, asana, and then people who can also lift us up, encourage us to push forward, wage war against our senses. That's what I'm trying to do right now. So try it out at home for all the listeners and see how it works. If you have questions, keep tuning in, and we'll have lots more discussions on different topics that can elaborate on these very essential subjects of life, where we can connect to our higher source, this higher power, and become free from the pullings of the senses, become free from illusion of this temporary existence, and understand that on the spiritual plane of existence we have unlimited free will, because the nature of the soul is it's eternal, it's full of knowledge, and it's always blissful. And what we're ultimately searching for is bliss, this happiness in life. So if we can start a practice by which we can understand that we're actual spiritual beings, and we're not just a material body, whatever we look in the mirror, then this inner fulfillment of the soul can come out, and we can connect to a higher propensity of existence. So how was that? Is that okay?
Great. Yes, I like it.
Thank you so much, Elena, for inviting me on this discussion of spiritual science. And we'll have lots more and other special guest speakers by which we can engage in these meaningful discussions more. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.